So the purpose of the open project is to connect real world assets to DeFi. And the way we intend to do this is by having tokenized properties, etc. Lock it in smart contract. Outcomes as stablecoin, which can be used somewhere. Now, what we currently are doing is this portion where we are starting with on-chain assets first, and we are locking it in a smart contract and outcomes as stablecoin, which is USDO. Now, USDO is already live on BSC. We have a few collateral types, and it's very much like DAI. We lock in collateral and outcomes as stablecoin. Usually in case of ETH. Now there are a bunch of them in case of DAI. Now, when DAI has been around for a few years now, but essentially DAI uses a few different mechanisms. They use interest rates in particular to get things to peg. Beyond that, you are DAI also has something called as the peg stabilization module, where you can redeem the underlying USGC. In case of SNX SUSG, you have stake SNX mint SUSG. The difference between DAI and SUSG is that SUSG is redeemable, which means you can always get $1 worth of SNX by paying back SUSG. In case of DAI, that's not the case. The difference between both of them is like in case of SNX, there is a common debt pool. And over here, each user has his own CDP, which is collateralized debt position. So you can't really take DAI and redeem it for the underlying collateral. But now that DAI has many different applications, it tends to trade at $1. Whereas SUSG is you can use the underlying redeem the $1 worth of underlying collateral. There is, however, a conflict between using multiple collateral and using single collateral. Single collateral allows you redeemability, whereas this one does not. The reason is you have a common debt pool over here in case of single collateral like SNX, which means that anyone can bring their SUSG and get a portion of the underlying collateral. Whereas in case of DAI, because there are different collateral types, you have to ensure that anybody who has DAI does not end up taking somebody else's CDP. Because let's say you minted it using ETH and BTC, and you wanted to keep your ETH because that's the whole point of this, then you cannot really have a single common debt pool where anybody can redeem your collateral, because that will lead you to lose your underlying collateral. But in the case of SNX, you have redeemability, which can give you a very strong peg, whereas in DAI you can have a bit of volatility, and that they are just using interest rates, and also the fact that there are multiple applications now that actually use DAI. That's the most important thing. You need places where your thing can be used. Otherwise, what will happen is people will take DAI and immediately trade it to USDC, USDT, something like that. What would happen in this case if there were not many applications which were using it is there will always be a downward. So if this is the peg, there will always be a downward sell pressure. Okay, because people want to sell USDO for let's say BUSD in our case right now. So which means that, let's say this is 0.9, this is 1.1, this is 0.8. Typically we would trade somewhere like this, which means that we are underwater by this much amount. Now the reality is each USDO is backed by well over more than $1 worth of collateral. So what gives? So the answer is really the fact that you can't really use USDO for $1 worth of value somewhere else. You can't redeem it for $1 worth of assets, whether they are physical assets, virtual assets, or services. No, there is no use case for that right now. Obviously, we are working on that and we are going to build more things, but it's a bit of a chicken and egg. Unless you have the peg where it is exactly redeemable for something like BUSD or some other stablecoin which is more widely accepted, other people will not exchange their services for USDO. Now there is one more issue. Right now we are on PancakeSwap, which has a very high slippage curve. If we were on something like Curve, which interestingly is flat in its significant portions of its bonding curve, the slippage would be significantly lower. So given the liquidity which we have currently, we would easily trade at parity if we were on Curve. Okay. The issue over here is that being on Curve is a permission thing. So there are other things like ellipsis. We were on Value DeFi, VPEG earlier, which is a fork of Saddle Finance, which again is a fork of Curve, but using Solidity. But everybody knows what happened with Value DeFi, so we don't really have a stable swap solution right now. So we are actually working on our own implementation of stable swap, which will hopefully go live in the next few weeks, at which point we will have far lower slippage with even with the liquidity which we have, which means that portion of our issue with the peg will automatically go away. If VPEG swap was still functional, I mean it is still functional, but it's the Value DeFi contract challenges which we don't want to deal with. The stablecoin would have done, the peg would be much easier to achieve. But right now we have an issue where we are on Pancake, which is not actually designed for stablecoin swaps, and the slippage is extremely high. So first step is getting on something which has stable swap like thing, and that would reduce the slippage significantly. So step one, get on a stable swap. The second thing, and this part is really chicken and egg, get the peg, get partners, so we are having some success in this, where we have partners who are willing to offer incentives for USDO. We already have Reef, which offer 25k worth of incentives. You can stake Reef, mint USDO, and USDO BUSD LP can be staked on a farm to earn more Reef tokens, which is good, and that incentivizes LP tokens, LP providers, which if it was not for PancakeSwap, the slippage would be much lower. But it's a good start. We'll probably get a few more partners along the line, but the reality is it's going to be a bit of an uphill boulder pushing thing, because anytime people mint USDO, they're going to say, okay, what am I going to do with this? Okay, sure, I can provide LP, which will allow me to earn Reef and let's say BDP soon enough, and then there are a few others like Trust Swap, Define, and others who are lined up, and that will help as well. So as we get more partners, more incentives, liquidity grows, that will again reduce the slippage. But the reality is still we actually build use cases where USDO is accepted natively. The token will kind of always trade below its intended peg. And the reason is, again, the minute you mint USDO, sure, you can either provide liquidity or you can see what you can do with it. And the reality is you can't do anything with it. That is where, so the question becomes, can we work with partners to get USDO accepted in their systems? But unless, if somebody is providing something of value, which is either assets or services, then they need to convert that USDO to something which is widely accepted, which is USDC, T, BUSD, etc. So again, it will always lead to selling pressure unless and until there are native applications where USDO is used. So there are some native applications which we are building or working on building, which one of them is the fork of synthetics, where people can stake USDO instead of SNX and mint various SYNs. And in our case, it's AUD, SGD, Euro, and then they can trade in between each other. And that gives some use case for USDO. The concern which we have over here is obviously, will we get traction right now on these things? And the reality is the market is going a bit sideways. Speculators are not in the market at the moment, which means that we have to be very careful about where our resources are deployed. And to that effect, there is this solution which we are working on with our partner project, is something which is a lottery slash bond. Now, lottery is an interesting thing. Lottery by itself doesn't really have any value. When you buy a lottery, when your odds of winning the lottery are extremely low, like 0.00000, God knows, I mean, depending upon which lottery it is, the odds are very low. So why do people buy lotteries? And the reality is, sure, they want to win it, but lotteries actually provide value to people in this form of the thrill quotient. Till the lottery is, tickets are drawn, you are engaged, you are excited. Even if you lose, I mean, sure, it's only a small loss. So it's a small loss potential, very, very high gain if you win. But more importantly, anticipation, thrill of the wait. That's what people are really buying. That's why people gamble. People gamble not because they think they are going to win each time, etc. The reason why people gamble is because they enjoy the act of gambling. The ticket itself gives them enjoyment. It allows them to anticipate something. And that's something. I mean, personally, I don't really buy lotteries, but I remember buying lottery tickets as a child, and the tickets themselves were really, really beautiful. And we would actively wait. Oh, wow, I have a lottery ticket. Am I going to win? If I win, all the nice things that would happen to me in my life would change forever, etc., etc. I mean, that thought itself is joy. So the price of the lottery ticket, the value which is provided by the lottery ticket, is the thrill of the wait. And it needs repeating because it's a very important concept. Now, what we are doing over here is, this is a product or service or an intangible asset which need not be backed by anything else. Okay. For every other scenario where USDO is exchanged for something else. You need somebody else to accept it. But in the case of a lottery, you don't need USDO or the lottery to be backed by anything else. So what we are really doing over here is we are instituting a form of a raffle, really. Not lottery is not a correct term, where people deploy BUSG in it. They get a lottery ticket. Okay. This smart contract then goes and uses this BUSG to buy USDO, and that sort of puts upward pressure on the price of USDO. Now, people who have this lottery tickets can go to pool together, where we are going to institute lotteries, and stake their lottery tickets and see if they win. Now what this does is, if the USDO price is below $1, then it buys it. If it's above $1, then deposits in the reward pool. And in order to get this triggered, we are going to deposit seed, so that there is at least, say, $1,000 to $5,000 worth of winning assets in here. There are some more bells and whistles in this, where even if you lose, you can take the lottery tickets and then stake them in a farm and gain some other incentives. The incentives themselves are not yet decided, but the point is you will not lose money even if you lose the lottery. The other thing is, these rewards which we are putting in the form of seed, let's say this is open or some other token, it will be in the form of claim tokens, which would then allow distribution over an extended period, which would prevent dumping of the reward token and dropping of the reward token's price itself. So it's an experimental concept. We are not completely sure whether it will work. It's quite plausible that it will work, and it kind of all boils down to whether we are able to get our message out to enough people. That's what the thing is. I mean, like, if you don't have enough people buying the lottery tickets, then obviously this is not going to work. Or maybe there's some fundamental flaw in this whole design which we haven't thought through. But it is worth an experiment while we are building use cases for USDO, native applications for USDO, getting more partners onboarded. All of these things will continue to happen in parallel. But this could be a short-term fix which could potentially work, and that should help the peg. So things which will happen is get on a stable swap, which is actually going to be our own, partners, incentives for LP. This is going to be low slippage. Third thing is native applications for USDO. And the fourth thing is peg maintenance via lottery-based crowdfunding, I would say. So those are the four main things which we are doing to get the peg in place and also build more distribution, more adoption. And that's what our focus is going to be in the next few days and weeks and probably months. Because if we can get the peg and we have enough liquidity, then at that point we can start say, okay, I have a house, let's tokenize it and get USDO, which is $1. If you don't have the peg, then obviously this portion is not going to work. So getting the peg is extremely important. So that's what is our focus going to be in the next few days and months. Thanks again. Cheers. Bye.